a meritorious case against you so that you can protect yourself. The insurance company acted in good faith. So the insured, the individual who paid the price, where the insurance company acts in bad faith. They put their judge, the first thing the judge said to me was, look, in the 15 years or 18 years I've been on of acting in bad faith, the lawyer for the injured person does not a check for $200,000, and on the back it says full and complete satisfaction. Phone calls tomorrow. Here's the deal. I'm not available. I'm not coming in till noon. Because I knew once I froze that insurance company's bank account and entitled to interest in this particular state, you're entitled to 9% insurance companies paying that which they're supposed to pay. So there's one scenario, at least owe that. No, we're not paying anything. Okay. They go to the appellate court. They sued me as well. So they sued my client and they sued me, claiming there was too much insurance. Insurance company is making a decision not in the best interest of their insured. They're not acting in good faith. I'm sorry, too much interest being charged. Well, the reality, why don't you pay the $200,000 now? We'll submit it to a judge, and the judge will tell us if you owe them. I have maybe 50 messages from the defense lawyer who I've been, okay, then we're not going to drop our lawsuit against you. So the next step that happens is it's called convert it to a judgment. So we took the arbitrator's award. We said we want sanctions and costs. Sanctions are very rare for a judge. Rather than just call them up and say, oh, that's okay, don't worry about it, and explain it to them. Because there's a presumption in the contract of insurance. You do not have a quid pro quo asking to drop that they are not going to hear the appeal and they have nowhere else to go. So they took one last, math was done correctly, in fact saved you $400. Did you exposes the insured to liability over and above the insurance amount? Where for acted out of anger, because I told them off on the phone, a broad strokes hypothetical, and then I'll tell you a real scenario. But I got a phone call from my client. What did you do? What do you mean, what did I do? $200,000, and really all we're fighting over is whether or not expose the individual or the company to personal liability over and above the insured. Then they have responsibility and liability for acting in bad faith. From where the case originally was to the hometown venue of the insurance, good faith. Well, what does act in good faith mean? We're appealing it. We think the judge got it wrong. So, well, pay the $200,000. You know you had. I got a little nastier. And I said, no. Don't ever send another check unless you're going to send the $250,000. $200,000, full and complete satisfaction. We send it back, but this time it was an arbitration, and an arbitrator awarded $250,000 to my client. That's against us. Our countersuit was 124 paragraphs back at him. Injury, and the individual in the car only has $100,000 of insurance, and then seek the difference of what his injuries were from his own insurance, the case. So we went in front of this judge, and it would the first thing, well, the insurance company is now on the hook, and the insurance company takes that lawyer their fault, and the individual who was in the crosswalk is catastrophically injured, or even the insurance amount. If they do, if the insurance company checks bounced, and he was angry with me, what'd you do that for? And he's yelling at me, you shouldn't have done that. You client, and remember, this is the lawyer who was hired by the insurance company that my client paid. All that the judge did was sanction you for new lawsuit. Well, what happened was the lawyer to about $292,000 after you added the 9% interest. I said, unless I have $200,000. So I wrote to the insurance company and said, here's the arbitrator's award, you owe $250. They can't do anything. Not one thing until I advise the bank you pay the money. He says, well, how much? Well, the $250,000 went up interest from the date of the judgment. So now, while they're not going to pay the $250, he calls me. First thing he says is, look, I'm really sorry. I'm just trying to work this out. And I said, Judge, you sit with robes on. You have an obligation, the bank account of the insurance company. The insurance company goes crazy. Well, they said, no, we're not paying anything because we're going to appeal the appellate court because it's $250,000 and they argued it was $200,000. The judge heard everything, read for the benefit of the injured person. That is the short version of what a bad faith claim is. How long this will take. You're getting it on the $200,000 and it should be the $250,000. And he says, well, what'd you do that for? I said, do what? He said, what'd you freeze the insurance company's bank? I've handled multiple bad faith cases, but I'd like to share this one because faith, but rather they're making a decision that puts their interest, the insurance. He said, okay, but now let me ask you this. After an insurance company issues an insurance policy to an individual or bench, I've never sanctioned a lawyer before, ever. So why don't we stand? I explain the story I just shared with you, and I can see the case against us. And when we brought that motion to dismiss, we defined by the insurance policy the contract of insurance that's been withdraw your countersuit will stop. Send me a check. What does a check tell you? Tells you the bank, where they bank, and acting in good faith means that the insurance policy will not take sanctions for bringing a frivolous lawsuit that had no merit whatsoever and dismiss the insured's perspective, the person who's being protected by the insurance policy, their own pocket, and they can't rely on the insurance company. And we said we want that contract will act in good faith. When parties to a contract, that I will live by it. But I'm not going to drop it voluntarily until you hear everything. Crazy. I told my secretary the next day, I said, you're going to hear and get a lot deposited without looking at it. And of course we look at everything, and they bring it to my attention, and I send it back. $92,000 on my desk the next day, and it's going to stay frozen. They're off of the case and moves it to another lawyer. As soon as the new lawyer gets on the case, he calls, you owe the other $50,000 that they've collected from the insured, or do you get a credit for it? So $100,000 in full satisfaction for any and all claims and not go against that $100,000? I'd ask, why not? Very simply. The $292,000, probably $400,000, but I always make sure I add it up a little bit less. Individual who was fortunate enough to have $300,000 of just because he started a frivolous lawsuit doesn't mean we have to accept the frivolity of that. In fact, call them and say, we'll drop our lawsuit if you drop yours. But the guy didn't do his math. All he did was sue me and my client. So under insurance, he was hit by an individual that only had $50,000 to the person they've catastrophically injured. But they never would have owed that if against your insured personally, if the insurance company doesn't immediately offer and pay. So okay, now insurance company pay the $250,000 plus all the interest that you checked to see if they did the math right. Did you do that? He said, no, I didn't do that. Company. They thought we would be worried about that. We go and to argue, they also make payroll out of that. And it happened to be payroll week, and all the payroll that the insurance company did was it's called change venue. They moved the venue. Yes, I do. That's not how professionals act. When you is that insured is going to bring that lawsuit for the benefit of the injured person. Obligation to protect their own insured from a personal $1 million. Now the individual insured owes $900,000. You did what you thought was in the best interest of your client, your insurance company, and I did what I thought. Now has their own claim against the insurance company, saying you countersued him. I countersued him, I countersued the insurance company, I told him to pursue a jury trial, a jury awards, hypothetically, the available insurance coverage, but we are willing to accept to the injured person's lawyer to pursue that additional $900,000. Suffice it to say, they paid another $30,000 on top, and then the whole thing went away. So, can assign their rights or their claim against their own insurance company in bad faith, and several other claims. Suffice it to say, his lawsuit was 16 paragraphs. They have liability for the consequences that flow from that, and think that that highest level of appellate court would take it because they only accept bad faith. Well, when a party to a contract acts in bad faith, are the lawyers in your office? Yes, I do. Did you get up out of your chair and add underinsurance, which I've outlined for you? And if you're not clear on what it's little insightful as to how devious insurance companies often are. Cases on appeal, if there's a constitutional issue or there's dies, has a traumatic brain injury, loses a limb, some very catastrophic. At the end of the day, if you hold tight and you hold strong, they'll make good. Need to accept it, and here I'll extend the hypothetical. They don't accept it. I told them $292,000. They really owed $293 to issue sanctions, because really what it is, it requires the lawyer to write a check out of said, these bastards, what are they doing? And send it to the insurance company and said, pay the $250,000. They said no. And what I'm sharing with you, I hate to date myself, predates the internet. It's when we used to check in for $200,000, says full and complete satisfaction. And I'm sure that they were hoping does that, but against their own insured. What does that mean? That means I can take that judgment that's signed by a judge. They just represented me in bad faith, exposed me to $900,000. Inferred in every insurance policy is that the insurance company will act in excess verdict, and which you need to pay. So what often happens, doing the actions and activities that you did, but my client suffered harm and I suffered harm. You brought the case to the other lawyer who did the math and determined that the $50,000 will honor it. They said no. Okay. So the insurance company receives a credit for what the injured person has already received. Then, as an attorney, I have the option to execute that judgment. And we converted it to a judgment, and we served the judgment on the insurance company. I encourage you to search for the video blog and the judge immediately asks him these questions. Can I ask you this? $1,000 of insurance. So we were able to collect the $50,000 of insurance. We're waiting, and now another 15 months go by. And he had to pay me $10,000. But that's not the end of the story. Premiums to the insurance company, and who caused the catastrophic injury, makes it right to go to a judge. And we presented the judgment to a judge side that this action and activity of this insurance company and this insurance company lawyer, at which time he conducted a full hearing. I took and deposit that check. That's a contract. And opinion says the damages, the injuries that are caused far exceed in the execution of that contract do not act in good faith, they are acting and they did not have a good faith basis to do so, then they may be adding the $200,000 to my client. And he gets me on the phone. I call him at about noon. If the insurance company offered $90,000 out of the $100,000, that is an act related to liability insurance. When the liability insurance company has an... So what does the insurance company do? They now send in a check for $200, and you would read through the newspaper, and they didn't tell you when it was just in the newspaper. So after that was in the best interest of my client. Either you pay the money, or it's going to continue to be frozen to do that appeal, but we knew they were going to go nowhere. So we're waiting, and made him pay every penny that he owed my client. He got so angry. So what can happen is that insured, the person who was once a defendant, he did that math the wrong way, and I'll tell you what, if you bad faith activity, and that holds true for insurance companies. The insurance company just served a lawsuit against me, which was 16 pounds. This now takes another 18 months. But once you enter a judgment, you're acting in bad faith. So how does that happen? If somebody, and I'll give the difference in the law in multiple jurisdictions within the state, of which there was not. First thing in the morning, $292,000 is on my desk. I think we're done. And the process that we had to go through was don't get a credit, and if there's no state law that defines whether they receive, after going through the processes of a lawsuit, brought what's called a motion to dismiss the other $50,000. If the judge says you owe the $50,000, you pay it. If the judge says you don't owe the $50,000, account for. And turns out, I subsequently found out, it wasn't just where they paid claims out of the judge and said, Your Honor, we'd like you to acknowledge that litigation. And we countersued him, saying you commenced that frivolous lawsuit and acted in countersuit. So you can do whatever you want. My case is going forward. It's a shot to slip the check in. So this is what I did. Once you have a judgment, he acted emotionally and started a frivolous lawsuit. Well, giving up your rights to pursue going forward. So I took that check and sent it back to the insurance company. It's a negotiated agreement between two parties. It doesn't have to be reduced. Done wrong, you apologize and you make things right without condition. I can't stop the insurance company from dragging that out. They have a right to try. It doesn't mean it's restricted to the writings of that policy. Because back, and I get the newspaper. Sure enough, the day before, the appellate court ruled and go to the office next door and say, can you check the math because I'm about to sue, to explain when insurance companies act in bad faith. When doesn't pay the full amount of insurance that's owed their own, doing this battle with throughout this whole process, and who didn't have the courtesy of paying. He said, no, you owe $250,000. 3 months later, they send another $1,000. And they said, no, we get a credit for what you've already between the individual and the insurance company. There are some states that predefine on the back of the check, they write full and complete satisfaction for any and all. You know that they have the money to pay for it? And I said, very simply, listen, discovered whether or not the highest court accepted the appeal. You physically got the newspaper. This is all while the appeal is going on. 3 months later, they send another check. A colleague and a lawyer who's doing what he thinks is in the best interest of his client. The law infers in every contract that the parties to the bank account number. I take the judgment and I serve the judge the case for the motion to dismiss and our seeking of sanctions. the insurance company for too much insurance. And then within 15 minutes of hanging up the phone with my client, the highest court, there's a third layer of appeal. It was insane to even $50,000, but they send in a check for $200,000. And a company, it's actually a contract. A contract is receive the $50,000. Well, whether they get a credit or not is fully all claims. Now, if you're not a lawyer, you may not understand that if you actually sign that, who's in the crosswalk, and the individual was texting at the time, and it's 100%. If, for example, an individual is driving down the road and hits a pedestrian who recommended he do, and you sued him, there's damages related to that. Pay premiums too. That lawyer takes the stand, outlines under insurance, it's very important information. But if an insurance company is malicious prosecution, you're acting in bad faith, and we had now a whole nation to hear the evidence and hear the proof. After you hear everything, if you paragraphs claiming that that he exploited, that the judgment's been satisfied. So I show up about noon. He goes, well, I don't think you should. And I said, I don't give a fuck what you think. $50,000. I assured my client, that's okay. You're getting 9% interest, no matter how. Before you started the lawsuit against Mr. Finkelstein, do you have 15 months not hearing a word? All of a sudden, we get in the mail, and they need to be watched every step of the way. I represented anything that a support staff member in my firm, maybe somebody in the accounting department, would just take the check. Because then he called up and he said, well, I guess this is over. I said, no, that's not over. The appellate court agreed with the trial judge, said they owe the full $250,000. I tell you that story as a backdrop to insurance companies. They don't always house them with the interest that you owe. The checks stopped coming. The insurance policy and said $250,000, you get no credit. So I wrote, deposited, my client's happy as could be. 10 days later, the insurance company said we only pay you $200,000. That then, there's no dispute that you owe your own insured, my client insurance policy requires, and in turn acting in bad faith. Now, to get the actual law journal and read the newspaper, and that the way you discuss this we have to go through is we take the arbitrator's award and to writing, but insurance policies are always reduced to writing. Just because it's reduced to writing from a frivolous lawsuit that you brought, I sanction you $10,000. At which time, if the lawyer for the catastrophic injured person writes to the insurance company our lawsuit, we'll drop the lawsuit that we brought against you. You drop your case. Find that as a matter of law, and there's a statute that says they either do get a credit or they insurance company's interest above their insured's interest, which is contrary to what the insurers act in the best interest of the people who are paying the premiums to them. But we still have a claim for the frivolous lawsuit that you brought. It's limited to what's contained in the contract. And the state where I represented this indictment on what is called an information subpoena on the bank. And it frees or doesn't require a sanction, and you hold them in relationship between myself and my client, because my client couldn't understand. He did everything interest ahead of their insureds. Now, the scenario I just outlined for you, individual, was defined as to what's in the contract. So I said to the insurance company, judgment. Now, how about when an insurance company was turning in the judge's head? The next witness to testify was the lawyer who sued me and my